The Sather Tower on the University of California's Berkeley campus is a landmark. It is seen from San Francisco across the bay. The design studio occupies the entire 7th floor of the College of Environmental Design. The course, Introduction to Architectural Design, is in its 12th week of a 15-week semester.
Okay, I want to talk about drawings for a minute, because most of you look like you're just barely getting started on them. At this point, you've got a choice of doing either on a board or on 24 by 36 sheets. Some of you may want to do your drawings on boards instead, and if you've had experience with
a very traditional studio in architectural design. It's the kind of class that you would find in any school in the country.
Done for the next review.
Keep in mind that the presentation is going to be to present the house as a scenario, and the scenario will be the day that they have their giant housewarming, and we want you to show our guests how they have showed their guests through the house. The thing that makes this class a bit special is that we spend a lot of time talking about the people who would occupy the things that the students are making at home, and we want to see the house as they describe it to their friends.
Okay, that makes a difference.
Well, what makes this class quite different is that we have the students think about people unlike themselves.
I think this is real awkward. This is your person in a wheelchair, right?
Yeah.
She's going to have a devil of a time getting around.
Then I can widen this path up, I suppose.
Good idea, Charlie.
It was just an access path. I didn't want it to have the same prominence as this path.
Right, but if you're going to have access, it has to work.
We have the students think about elderly people, to think about children, and most interestingly, to think about people who have physical disabilities.
This angle here a little bit longer than this one, so that forces you into this nook here.
And what is unique about us is that we employ on a regular part-time basis several disabled people as design consultants.
That's nice. You know what I was worried about too here is there's no rail here or anything, and to have somebody with a wheelchair there, there's no problem with them accidentally maybe.
The only thing let me have the pencil. Only thing I
Cheryl Davis came to work for the design studio 5 years ago.
Measure 30 inches. What is 30 inches?
30 inches
Right
is...
there. That's low then. That's low. 36 is there.
36 is...
Just about right.
Is it 3 feet 36? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. But you've made it really
C.C. Weeks joined the design studio last fall.
What do you think about the standing person having the bar in front of their eyes?
Actually, that makes it more interesting because that creates a frame.
My perception, it would be interesting for a while, and then after a while, it would be frustrating. If you're trying to enjoy the view to be...
You're sort of trapped if you're given ready-made places to live in.
And this
Peter Trier was one of the studio's first disabled consultants in 1978. And since then, he has worked many semesters here.
An architect who just took it from some design manual would come in and give some model, and each of the bathrooms would look very much alike, and the doors would be a certain width and so on. Wouldn't be very useful, so that sounds really good.
Peter's one-day visit today is to review this semester's work.
Person in the wheelchair.
So there are heights that are easier for him to reach and heights that are easier for
Right,
him to
and they're adjustable.
These designs represent a story of many people relating. We've been talking a great deal about how the subject of access gave shape to the things that they have made. And that is important, but access for the disabled person is not nearly so important in shaping the whole building as is the relationship of all these people one to the other, or the relationships between them or among them. That the design reflects something much more complex than making the thing accessible for one person.
Professor Ray Lipshay has been teaching and developing this course for more than a decade.
Top of the second floor.
Barbara Winslow is one of 5 other teachers who works with one section of this 83-student class. Barbara is also a practicing architect, a partner in a Berkeley architectural firm.
They write a biography of each of the clients that they're looking at. They actually design the clients. We specify that one of the residents or one of their close friends is a person who uses a wheelchair. And that's our objective, is to get them to look at the world through the eyes of the clients rather than treating it as a disembodied sort of problem. Now, the other wheelchair problem that you had was the question of getting somebody from this yard into this yard. You've talked a lot about how the kids play together.
Right.
We often find in the making of the models that a design will look quite good for many days, and then when we come back to the student and we discover that the design has been totally altered, a room has been taken away, or a doorway has been changed, and you're quite surprised, and you'll say, why, how has that come about? And they will say, well, the relationship changed. He moved out. Or they felt that this was not working out in terms of how they wanted to meet the public. And these kinds of considerations, which to them become far more important than, say, the physical circumstance of the design that they made that seemed to work so beautifully.
Tell me a little bit about what the project is supposed to be.
Okay, the project is supposed to be a house.
Is the pavilion part of what is now the house?
Yes.
Which is the pavilion?
Right here.
Okay.
This.
Who are your characters?
I have a man and a woman, Jonathan and Dorothy, and their son is Dion. He was 3 years old when I started the project, and now he's 8 years old. The disabled client is Dorothy's father, and he uses a wheelchair.
What is so valuable in our process might be misunderstood or thought to be a bit silly, which is the enormous amount of detail that a student begins to lavish on the biography. And not just at one sitting, but how that detail grows and changes, how it alters as they see these characters relating to one another or interacting. See these relationships through the process of making places in which they interact.
Dorothy wanted to make it simple to get to the entire site. Dorothy's father is close to 80.
Does he visit there often?
Yes, he's there practically every week. He likes to come over and spend some time with her.
Does he have his own room?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't live here. He's one of the visitors.
So does he live nearby?
He lives in Oakland, and he comes over with his wife, which is Dorothy's mother, and they, in case Dorothy needs a babysitter, they would take care of him.
Okay, so they would never want to stay overnight.
That's our role as critics. It's very much the role of our disabled consultants, who are always probing at these assumptions about these people, always probing about what seems to be the student's idea of what seems to be a proper setting for this relationship. Probing, not critically probing, I mean, not censoring, trying not to lay one's own assumptions on it, but digging at it.
The other thing is that if you were to get out of your wheelchair and get into bed, you're sort of leaving the wheelchair right there in the midst of the path, so that it doesn't have a place to be in that room.
Well, I had a choice of leaving the living area up on the same level, but she uses the bird sanctuary much more often. So when I came down to a choice, I chose to leave that open because she would be doing that more frequently than staying over. Staying over, unless she was sick or something like that, I really couldn't see her. Although maybe later, when the teenager moves out, she may become a permanent resident, then it would become a real issue.
So then there's not really a separate bed. They share the same bed, basically.
Small. The bed is small? How wide would you say is comfortable? It's a twin bed.
It's a twin bed?
Yeah.
For two people?
No, they wouldn't be sharing it. They wouldn't be staying in it at the same time. No, I mean...
Nor would either of them have overnight guests?
They may stay on the couch.
No intimate guests?
No, not allowed.
Probing disabled people who are shown without a sexual relationship. There's a probe. Why? Disabled people who are shown to be totally at home. The question, do they not work? Elderly people who seem to be totally withdrawn. Why? Where does that assumption come from? because these kinds of assumptions get built into the built world.
She really needs some place to be able to move the wheelchair, though, to be able to get it out of there in some way. I don't know if she has assistance when she goes to bed.
No, she just does it herself.
I guess she could pull the wheelchair forward and park it in this space that's down here.
I still feel that maybe these second steps are superfluous.
It looks like she'd be able to get the wheelchair to the front of that area, and then could back out and turn around in that triangular space.
Actually, I could just use a little bit more space in the teenage cottage.
There's a 5-year period between the time that the first design is done for the family or the group of people and the second design is done. And the first design is actually a small part of the later design. It's a pavilion and then it becomes a house. And in the first design, the student had a disabled person in his story who used a wheelchair, which was required by the course. And I later on saw the second stage design, which was 5 years later down the road, and I said, the student had completely erased all signs of accessibility in his building, and I said to him, well, what about your disabled person? And the student looked a little surprised, and then his eyes dropped, and he said, James passed on. And I said, though that relieves you of any obligation and for accessibility, and he says, yes. And then I reminded him that there were some fine line conditions in our contract.
I wanted to make my primary character disabled because I thought that was a good design choice. And at this point, I almost wish I had made her have a greater disability, so I would have been challenged even more, and if I did it again, I would probably do that. My primary client was Rachel, and she was paralyzed from her waist down in a car accident. She lives with her quasi-husband, and there's a child that also lives with them. Karen came from her best friend, who was terminally ill. Now the father and the child live together with Rachel. Initially, Karen really needed to feel comfortable with Rachel, and this is where the wheelchair came into play because it was so different from her mother's. It also put Rachel separate and made Karen really have to focus and deal with Rachel as a separate person.
It actually is sort of an access issue, is the fact that you've got this column in the center of the hallway.
Because I can push it out and put it onto the other.
Oh, that one.
That one.
Yeah.
How do you feel about coming in the door and having a column straight ahead of you?
Now, where does one come in?
You enter over here.
Ah,
through
yes.
This little pavilion.
Access wasn't an issue, say, with private clients.
Well, functionally, for me, it doesn't strike me as a big problem. It seems to me that what it tells me is a decision has to be made here as to which way I'm going, and it tends to make you stop.
And since I had structured my primary person as disabled, and it was a woman, it was nice to have Cheryl to transfer over some of her characteristics to that person that I created. We were talking initially about closet-type formation in a bathroom. It wasn't really good thinking on my part because I was really going by code instead of going by person. Cheryl said, really evaluate whether your client is the kind of person who could have a very public bathroom and show to the world what was her personal thing, or whether she wanted to keep that more private. I took it as an acceptance. If you knew my central character, Rachel, it wouldn't matter to you what special facilitation you needed. I made a really nice large restroom and everyone can use it.
Ah, that is very different.
I put a lip on the whole tub unit and the shower unit so you could transfer easily. So I really utilized Cheryl in a way that reaffirmed my understanding of not designing for a disabled person, but really for a person who just had some special needs. So you're getting this double feeling of someone who, like you, who's going to live in a home, and someone who's just a little bit different, but still is a person from their point of view also. So it's really, you get the double richness of this overlap of seeing people in the design process and seeing how that can influence in a definitely positive way the design that you come up with.
We want to hype their imagination. We want to get them to think as they have always thought, to use the faculties that they've used since childhood to imagine. to imagine people in places and doing things. Well, he needs more space. Why? Because he brings friends home.
He does, but he entertains with the parents. The family itself is one of the more closer kind of European kind of families in which he's actually a nephew, so he's treated as a part of the family, but he's treated a little bit more adult-like instead of
because he's not their kid.
Because he's not their kid, right? That's one of the reasons why the way the stair goes and the room situation.
Well, I don't understand why there is a half level. What bearing that has on this relationship he has to his parents.
Well, for one thing, I wanted it to show a little bit of hierarchy in the house, in that he is not living on the ground floor. He is part of the family, but he's not at the same level as those that own the house and live in it and work and support it.
Oh, he's on the rise.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you get rid of the whole long rationalization.
In the beginning, the relationship between consultant and student can be extremely awkward.
The first thing I think was most of us have never been in very much contact with disabled people, and so we really don't know what to expect.
The first time I came in as a design consultant was probably early '79. There were a fair number of students the first time who either wished to ignore us or be quite mad about being told to change their design, and we try not to do that.
At first it was a shock just to see, someone disabled moving around the studio. And then they would talk to us and ask us questions about, what are you doing to consider this aspect or that aspect, such as movement or maybe reaching or something like that. They would ask us how we were designing for that, and then we would explain that to them. And sometimes it wouldn't be quite adequate.
When I see them resisting, I tend to back off and come back later. I never force anything. If the student is resistant, rather than opening themselves up to experience, they'll feel that they're being lectured at, whether they are or not, and it doesn't do any good.
The students are quite good-hearted, but they are young. Many of them have had no experience of disability whatsoever. That, coupled with the fact that they're quite surprised that they have to deal with this in a course. It's not sociology. The student really feels judged in any course. They feel in a bind. They can feel very frustrated. You see this in the way the two interact. The conversation can be very stilted, or there can be a lot of avoidance, not being at one's desk, avoiding the issue.
I think sometimes students don't take it seriously. I think it has a lot to do with the person's fears about disability, how much they want to look at making a world accessible versus treating it lightly.
There are parallel problems that the disabled person feels. What am I really doing here? I'm not really valid. Are they just using me? Am I window dressing? And so on. Because both parties want to succeed with the agenda they believed they came with, to do design or to fulfill some vague obligation to me, they tussle with this thing that that we want to have happen.
They're terribly afraid of hurting one's feelings, and they're afraid of looking stupid. They need to know that they are not going to get criticized for asking a question, and they need to know that they're not going to offend me. I'm very comfortable with my disability.
So, I mean, I want them to know that I'm a person. I pretty much have the attitude that I can do anything I want to do. And that's kind of the way I've been all my life, and the way I was raised since I was a little child. That's important for me to know. And then also other things, that I'm an artist, that, I have a family, that I have friends, that I have a lot of different interests. And just to see me on a level where I'm equal to them.
There is a kind of locking in place of a new expectation and its fulfillment But that, between the beginning and that end point, there's a lot of discomfort. And it's the discomfort that most people don't want to deal with in schools, least of all. I mean, why? It's much easier to go visit disabled people at home and treat them as natives in their quarter. It's even easier to have disabled people come and lecture, and the interaction is perfectly clear, or what's expected is clear, there are questions and answers. It's easier to put kids in wheelchairs and say, see how difficult it is to get around. But what's really hard is to actually have those folks with you and to treat them, the disabled people, as someone whom you really need as part of your process.
I gave someone a hard time about it in the review, where they were building this house for a family, a couple kids and the parents, but 98% of the amenities and the interesting things in the house satisfy the parents, and all the kids get was a small little room off in the corner and not even a particularly good place to play. Well, that's just bad architecture. And there's no reason why someone who's fairly sensitive to the environment, how it impacts on people, can't be as perceptive about that as someone who's an architect, even though ideally architects should learn those things.
I got very tired of feeling that my needs had not been considered in public buildings. And basically, I realized it wasn't out of any great antipathy to disabled people. It's a matter of cultural evolution. Until the last 20 or 30 years, disabled people didn't get out much, and architects for hundreds and hundreds of years have simply not had to think about this.
For me, as a design consultant, I can challenge the students' attitudes and perceptions about disability, just sharing my personal life with them, how I live and what my struggles have been. I was born in a small town of 50 people in Alaska, and my father's a construction worker. Kind of traveled around the United States a lot because my father built roads and we had to go where the roads were. Broke my neck in a diving accident in 1969 at the cervical 4-5 level. I broke my neck when I was 14 and I'm 28 now, so it's been half my life that I've been using the wheelchair.
I'm 33, and I have kind of hereditary muscular atrophy, that the nerves don't adequately nourish the muscles, so I can only maintain a very low level of strength. And it's fairly stable, maybe very slowly progressive, but I don't notice it much. My parents were real supportive, and my mother drove me back and forth to school and college for years and years. And then I got accepted at grad school in philosophy at Berkeley. Last June, I finally got my PhD, and I'm teaching class in the philosophy of law at the University of the Pacific. I was married for several years and in a divorce now. I would like to get a regular job teaching philosophy and/or humanities, great books. I'm pretty active in the community.
My disability is spina bifida. I was born with this. It's a malformation of the spine, happens very early in embryonic development. It's not a progressive condition, and I like the students to understand that. I want to individualize disabled people. I want students to know that I am a 38-year-old professional woman, an aspiring writer, a would-be novelist, someone who has fantasies of making it in the theater. I have lived a very active life, had some affairs, broken a few hearts, done the things that a lot of other people would merely like to do. I tell students that I wanted to move to California 5 years ago, and the only logical way to get out here was to drive. I found that no other woman I personally knew had ever driven coast to coast alone. The trip was scary, often exhilarating, so it turned out that I hadn't just done something that was pretty good for a trip. I had done something that a lot of women haven't done.
I was here for about a year, and I felt that we should enlarge students' views of the world. And so I said, well, how are we going to introduce people unlike kids themselves?
The first time I really experienced disabled people as consultants, it was probably about the first time I had really experienced disabled people as people. I think I had gone through life without actually meeting anyone who was in a wheelchair.
Why don't we try having some surrogate clients in, some people who use wheelchairs in this case, to see how well they could interact with you around a design. As a matter of fact, Barbara Winslow was my student. It was a summer class. She had just come for a summer course to see if she wanted to be an architect, and she was in that first class.
They were telling us what their needs were as clients, which meant that we got the whole range of needs from them, just as you would from any client. And they were also acting as informers about disability.
What we began to find is that beyond the simple process of designer and surrogate client working together and sorting out what worked and what didn't work, the things that these disabled people were saying about the environment were things that I had never read before.
For them, the world consisted of a series of things to be taken on, and it was often very different. You looked at things with much more intensity.
They are probably more on top of their environmental perceptions than anybody, because they have to always be on their toes.
You planned ahead more. You assigned a higher value to a lot of things because you had to work harder to achieve them.
They have to always make judgments. And because of this knowledge, they are kind of a super environmental professional who can look at what you're doing and at least tell you in very explicit terms whether it would work for them or maybe for a lot of other folks.
They enabled me to see disabled people as people that had a whole variety of needs.
And it was from that class that Barbara and I began to write notes and say, isn't that interesting, isn't that interesting?
It gave me a wider perspective on what's going on in the world in a lot of ways. I had the opportunity, at about the same time we were introduced to our first people in wheelchairs, to use a wheelchair. And I decided that I really wanted to spend a week in a wheelchair, which I did, and ran into some of the same problems that people in wheelchairs do. And I had the incredible experience of seeing people that I knew on the streets and having them not recognize me, walk right by as if I wasn't there. The same people that 2 days earlier when I was walking would have greeted me. Just the impact of being ignored and not seen as a real person, simply because I was in a wheelchair. Most of the people that I saw that are walking actually do avoid eye contact with people in wheelchairs. They're afraid it would be embarrassing if they looked at someone and appeared to be looking at their disability, so they look away in uncertainty about what to do. It had the opposite impact on children. I found that when I was in a wheelchair, children who would normally ignore me as just another adult person would come up and speak to me. What happened to you? How come you're in that wheelchair? What's wrong with your leg? You know? Adults do not ask those questions. In fact, if the kid is with a parent, the parent will say, shh, Johnny, don't ask her that.
The table somewhere here. No, that's not good, because nobody can use this side. Let's say we can put the table here. You know, I don't know how it is. It doesn't look to me radical, but it looks...
Amos is an Israeli who is a slightly older male student. He is full of ideas and impact and vigor.
Amos, to me, is a student that wants all the details for every possible situation you can imagine.
Take a piece of paper, draw a quarter-inch wheelchair, and just go from the wheel and then go along.
Make sure you make it long enough, because you've got to
I'll take the dimension of
feet
her
in
chair.
front.
This is
Okay.
considered to be a conventional chair, I would say.
It's a small chair.
Yeah.
Small length or width? I know it will be narrow for me wide-wise.
We'll see width.
But one of the things that really attracts me a lot about Cece is that she's adventurous, or she has sense of adventurousness.
Open it below that sink so that you could pull forward into that area.
What if I put the sink without cabinet, just a sink here? So then I can go all the way in here.
Then how do you, in the wheelchair, face the sink to use it?
No, that's not good.
Well, we have a corner sink like our toilet. So the toilet's here,
So
and
we
the
have
sink
the
is over here.
sink here.
Like
You
that.
mean?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. What's happened there?
Would that be better for you than this?
I think is Barbara, what Barbara's saying, I agree with Barbara, this is more comfortable.
There, I think so too.
As long as you don't have the drain pipes exposed below.
Do you ever see, I mean...
We have a pedestal sink that's in the corner. So then the pedals to my chair are under each side of the sink. Or I can sit at the sink sideways. So I have those three options.
So let's see what happened to the corner. This is the corner, and you reach the corner. Do you go straight to the corner? You face the corner or side to the corner?
I usually go to the side, but that's my method.
So that's going to be the corner now, here. And
Right.
this is the sink.
But that depends, a lot of people vary on that. Depends what side they have their strength on and how easy it is to use it. So you need to
this
know.
person is pretty strong in his hand. You give CC possibilities of solutions, and all of a sudden you might be surprised that some of the solutions are okay, but it's not enough. You have to continue. And the reason it attracts me a lot is because this kind of a sort of quote-unquote adventurism of thought leads to some new ideas.
There's a big open space here in the living room.
Toby's project, he does such good work. He's been interested in the physical functioning of a disabled person. We wind up getting into more design discussions than personal discussions, just by the nature of the work and the fact that it interests me.
Having disabled people around has just put me at ease in a large extent with the whole issue of dealing with access for handicapped people. Realizing that they have special needs, but they also have means of fulfilling those needs. And that it's something that's very tangible, something that you can work with.
Good work.
My disabled person is Steve. He had an accident. He had almost a 50% chance to recuperate. We get to the pavilion, he get out of hospital with the hope that after a series of operations he might walk. They had to do a lot of thinking, whether should I improve his handicapcy or have him stay handicapped. They would either go to one side that make it sort of easy for me, it's simple and smooth, and then I will have more time and energy to concentrate on other elements of the design, not necessarily on handicaps. And on the other hand, I thought that since it's going to be more difficult, it's more challenging. And so I went all the way to the other direction.
The way the class is set up, that we write scenarios, we make up people, we write biographies, that could remain a thing, a sort of imagination. And one thing that whole process forces you to do is to reach inside and find whatever experience, whether it's a lot or little, you have.
I borrowed it for some example of some friends of mine. In the Yom Kippur War, October 73, many friends that I grew up with were disabled. I was wounded. My case is just hearing problems. And others that lose legs or hands or eyes or both. Some of them actually were killed. I had awareness even then in Israel for disabled people, but it was quite superficial. I didn't put so much thoughts on it until I get here to this class. I decided that in Steve's situation, within the 5 years, he managed to do a pretty good job with a lot of help of his girlfriend, future wife, Maureen. I'm proud that I'm able to solve this problem, and it's part of my personality, it's part of my life from now on, and I'm not going to hide it. This house represents me, and one of the uniqueness of this place is my own uniqueness as well. What is this uniqueness? It's the fact that I had a crisis in my life. I managed to overcome this crisis, and even more than that, I managed to use this to show some special things about myself. And one of them is I'm handicapped.
The proof is in the pudding. I mean, if we have produced designs that are worthy of a first semester undergraduate architecture course, that is the lure. That is what is going to make other people attend to this. It's also the thing that validates for the students what they have done, because it becomes a portfolio piece. It shows that you can be active in the world as an architect while being thoughtful.
The world isn't always going to be rosy for every person, and as each person progresses through their age, different things are going to happen to them. And if you design architecture for everyone, then those transitions will be made smoothly, and we won't have to keep adjusting the building as we go along.
It was very evident right away that the limitations that you might read in a code book were not too applicable in a personal home case.
Having a handicapped person in the class just offers a kind of a mirror or a springboard.
Cece and Cheryl are disabled consultants. We need more of them because there are so many of us that it's hard for them to get around and see each one of us often enough.
No, you're not going to put the garbage
Not
can right
there,
outside
no,
of her
it wouldn't
bedroom
go
door.
there. I suppose we could put a little berm.
She would be doing that more frequently than staying over unless she was sick.
In my scenario, the way it goes is that he spends a lot of time with his uncle.
The idea was to have a living room that can be closed off or opened up and used as one space.
I ran into a lot of troubles, and now I'm sort of almost over with this. I'm really happy that I ran into those troubles because I learned a lot about it.
I think freedom is a great thing. And when a person feels free to be able to ask me personal questions, it means that I'm touching them on a deep level. And that's something, for me, I think then that means something important is going on between us.
Part of the point that you're supposed to get out of the class is what I would describe again as a humanistic perspective, where you look at the unique attributes and situations of each person as sensitively as you can and try to encourage the development of that.
If it has done nothing other than teach a student to listen to people more, to look at them, to learn how people live, to respect their opinions even though they are not designers, I think that in itself can go a way to making a design student become a socially responsive architect.
And the most private is the one that she has closest access to, which is the back corner there.
One big difference in this class is that what we're really looking at is the procedure that it takes to get you there. How you develop a process, how you work with your clients, and how you elaborate them, and what impact they have on the design. It isn't so much what happens at the end, but what's going on every day, day by day, as you get more and more involved. That's exciting.